Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. We're going to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. It's the winter meetings, which made us think of, the Cubs are so busy signing all these great free agents. We decided to talk about the worst free agent signings. I was going to say since we started paying attention to the team, but Mike, we realized the Cubs, they didn't sign free agents before we started paying attention to the team.
That right?
Do you know who the first real free agent the Cubs signed was? A guy who, before that, the only free agents, in air quotes, they had ever signed were guys who were released by their teams, which
Not
doesn't
truly.
count. That free agency had existed forever.
Time immemorial.
But after the 1972, the Curt Flood decision comes down, there's free agency. Some real teams immediately start stealing players from each other.
Sure.
How many years do you think it was before the Cubs actually signed a free agent a guy who finished his contract with the team
and went to the open market,
right, and decided to sell his wares? How long do you think it was? From 1972 until when do you think the Cubs?
So, just because I was giving some thought about the history of free agency myself, and feel like there must have been some guys right around the time I was becoming a fan. But I kind of feel like when Dallas Green came in 1982. With the building a new tradition, like I was excited because for the first time he signed Bill Campbell and Fergie Jenkins, and I remember because up until then, like we knew about Reggie Jackson and Catfish Hunter going to the Yankees in the '70s, and I think we're fresh off of Dave Winfield, the epic San Diego Padre that to whom George Steinbrenner had given a huge deal a year before Dallas Green came to town. But prior to that. There's probably a really hilarious, it's probably right around there, 81, 80, especially because of the clues that you've given. So I'm just going to ask, was it prior to the 82 season in the Cubs, or did I already name the first free agent sign?
You named him.
I did?
You named him, yep.
Is it Bill Campbell, or is it Fergie?
Bill Campbell. So here's what the Cubs did. They didn't sign anybody classified as a free agent until February 17th of 1981. But that player was Jerry Morales, who had been released. So he doesn't really count. Plus, he's a former Cub. The second guy that they signed as a quote-unquote free agent was in spring training of 1981, Mick Kelleher. So they're just bringing back old duds who don't have contracts. And this is ironic. So on December 8th, 1981, the Cubs signed Bill Campbell, the first real, actual free agent they'd ever signed. Hours later, they brought Fergie back. So they were still 3 of their first 4 were guys they had just brought back who they already had employed.
No kid. Honestly, I would have thought that even Bob Kennedy would have like picked up a Ted Sizemore or something in 1979. It's like, I knew they weren't players. but 10 years, like literally not just the first real big name free agent, but just even anybody. I guess they probably did. Maybe there wasn't a whole lot of clamoring for mid-level free agents. All I know, I was super. It all contributed to the excitement at the time that they were doing things differently. But holy moly, 10 years before they even dipped their toe in the water.
It's a wonder that they were so good in those from 1972 to 1982, playing with one hand purposely tied behind their back.
Wow. So Bill Campbell is the answer, the first legitimate post Andy Messersmith free agent.
Soup, who only lasted 2 years, right?
Yeah, he was a big name in the American League in the 70s for the Twins and the Red Sox. And, we were still reeling from, well, not reeling, we had willingly, the same cheap-ass franchise had given up Bruce Sutter. At least we got Leon Durham. And the thing is, Lee Smith was emerging, so eventually he would sort of render Campbell. I believe Campbell ultimately became the centerpiece in the deal that got us Bobby Dernier and Sarge Matthews.
Right, that's the
days.
So that was that signing was a success because
I would say so.
2/3 of your outfield came just because of him, and he wasn't. Let's see, how did he pitch for the Cubs? He didn't pitch poorly.
Yeah, I think he was fine. The Cubs were not that. They were a mediocre team that probably didn't have a lot of save chances.
He led the National League in appearances in 1983. Pitched 82 times. Could be why his ERA went up by a full run. His arm was falling off of his body.
Oh, that's why you pay him. Soup Campbell.
All right, so that's the first one, but we really want to talk about the worst ones. So, we each have assembled a list. My list, I did the exercise where I'm like, okay, these are the worst ones. But then I just going through, just pulling names of duds. So we got all kinds of people to talk about. But I thought the way we would do this is we're each gonna one by one. We're going to talk about the 5 worst free agents in Cubs history. But then we got a lot of honorable mentions to get through after that. So I'm going to give you the honor. Are you giving me your 5th or your 1st?
I don't have them ranked. I haven't really. I just have a list of 5. I haven't really ranked them. I was in my head. I could throw them out in chronological order.
Oh, it's whatever you want.
Yeah, I haven't really ranked them, and neither of the first 2, which actually happened in the same year, would probably qualify as the worst. I don't know. I'm just gonna. I'll go ahead and throw one out there. I don't know if he was on your list, but one half of the awful free agent signings that ultimately ended the Jim Fry regime and ushered in the Tribune era of mediocrity by design, where they would no longer go after big free agents for a long time. But when that Coke bottle glasses wearing Jim Fry signed Dave Smith, who was really old. He had blown games in the 1980 LCS for Houston, the 86 LCS for Houston. Fry was still covering his ass from, of course, trading away Lee Smith and getting nothing for him, and then handing away more prospects for Mitch Williams, who basically busted out after 2 years. So to replace Mitch, he thought, let's get the rotting corpse of Dave Smith. And we've talked about it when we've gone over the 91 Cubs. I think Smith pretty much helped end the season before May with just a couple of just backbreaking losses early on. I don't even think he made it through the season, but big money. I don't know what it was, but it was definitely a premier, one of 3 that off season and one of 2 that would doom Jim Fry.
It was a 2-year deal with an option. Paid $1.9 million in 91, $2.5 in 92, and then they had to pay him $250,000 to not pitch at all for them in 93. He only made it 11 games into the 92 season before he was gone. And he was 36 years old when they signed him. Here were his ERAs with the Astros. 193, 276, 384, 310, 221, 227, 273, 165, 267, 264, 239. He comes to the Cubs, 6. And then 251, but only in 11 games. I wonder, do you think maybe this guy who threw 45 miles an hour missed pitching in the enormous Astrodome. Do you think maybe Jim Frey had factored that in at all? That maybe that wasn't going to work. Plus, he's old.
Frey was just spending like a drunken sailor. He had no eye for talent. That's been established.
But you mentioned the most important thing, which was Frey created a mess because he didn't like Lee Smith when he was a manager, and when he became the general manager, he couldn't wait to get rid of Lee, and it ended up costing him. He got nothing for him. He got Calvin Schiraldi and Al Nipper for him.
Wait, we did get Marvell Wynn and Darren Jackson for Calvin Schiraldi, so let's not go casting aspersions.
Well, Luis Salazar.
Yeah, okay, so it helped. Wait.
Marvell and Luis. That's who we got.
That's what it was. Okay. But anyway, yeah, so then
he had to chase that. He has to make the terrible trade.
Technically, wouldn't Goose Gossage have? I'm not going to consider one of my top 5, but he would have been a free agent signing to replace Lee Arthur Smith in the beginning. And they
just kept bringing in old guys who couldn't get anybody out. And then meanwhile, Lee is just cruising to like 300 more saves before he retired. And it was literally because Lee used to piss Frey off when he was a manager because Lee would sleep in the clubhouse until like the 7th inning. And Frey hated that. And then he hated it when he was the announcer for 1 year on WGN radio. And then he gets the job, and as soon as he can, he gets rid of Lee. And then, which is fine if you have a plan to replace him, but he didn't. And he could never figure it out.
Yeah, because Schiraldi was a starter. He signs Goose Gossage thinking that'll go. Obviously, his goose was literally, he was cooked. And then, like I said, he has to dip into the farm system that Dallas Green had so carefully curated for 7 years to get a short, one good year out of Mitch Williams, yes, but then he was already throwing Williams overboard after the 90 season, and he's going to go back to market for Dave Smith. He's just leaving a wake in his path of destruction.
Yeah. So Dave was bad, and then I don't know when did it beget Doug Jones at some point, and it was
96, a little bit later. Yeah.
I mean, Jim Frey wasn't the only Cub general manager just grabbing. The current guy is doing it now.
Yeah, I mean, from that period of time, they were struggling with they were getting by with Chuck McElroy and Bob Scanlon. I think Jim Bollinger was a closer for a while before he was a starter again. He had Jones in 96, replaced by Turk Wendell, Mel Rojas. Woo! Yeah, he was a trade maybe. I don't know. Didn't think about Mel Rojas. He's not on my list. I'm just going through the closers between Lee Smith and Rod Beck. But yeah, it was a rough going.
When the Cubs, let's see, what year did they trade Lee?
87. After the 87 season.
Because the year before that, they still had a guy who ended up being a pretty good closer. Dennis Eckersley.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
Oh, yeah. I think Dennis had to get out of town and get a fresh start.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do know that they saved his career and his life probably by trading him to Oakland.
Yeah. But he bellied up to Murphy's every day at 5 o'clock. It probably wasn't good for him.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to go right to the top of my list.
All right.
I didn't think he was going to be my all-time worst, but then when you factor in everything, I just had a hard time. All the other guys seemed Milton Bradley.
He was a free agent signing, wasn't he?
Yes. 3 years, $30 million. He made it. I don't know how he made it this long. He made 124 games.
This is good because he wasn't on my list. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm excited.
When Jim Hendry announced to the team in the visiting clubhouse in Busch Stadium, whichever one. 2, probably. 2008. Yeah. No, it's probably. I don't know.
It would be 2.
Who gives a shit?
2006.
That they had released Milton. His teammates cheered. He was universally loathed. It turns out later we find out that he's one of the worst human beings ever. No, he's not in prison anymore. Is he still in prison? I don't think he's in prison anymore.
I can't remember.
He was and it depends. Like I saw Other people have Kosuke on their list. Maybe you have Kosuke on your list. I don't know.
Do not. But that
I didn't put him on my list because I don't. But
he ended up being serviceable.
Milton came to the Cubs because Kosuke flopped. And Lou wanted a left-handed bat that he just didn't have. If they felt like in 2008 they lost to the Dodgers because they didn't have a left-handed bat on that really good team. Although they had Jim Edmonds, didn't they? Wasn't he flopping around in center? Yeah. And so they had to. Jim couldn't just add; he had to subtract before he could add. So he got rid of the great Mark DeRosa, which just pulled the heart right out of the Cubs. But Mark DeRosa was a good player for the Cubs and a very useful player because he could play everywhere.
Probably his two best careers for the Cubs, even though he sucked in the playoffs.
And then if you remember, Jim wasn't sold on Milton. Now, Milton had been an all-star in Texas the year before. He had led the American League in on-base average, OPS plus, and I guess that's why he let him in. He hit .321 with a .436 on base and a .563 slug.
Good numbers.
He'd been really good, but he'd also had been. The Expos couldn't get rid of him fast enough, and then the Indians couldn't get rid of him fast enough, and then the Dodgers couldn't get rid of him, and then the A's couldn't get rid of him, and then the Padres. He only played 42 games for them. He blew out his knee arguing with the umpire that he had beaten out a ground ball, stomping up and down. He tore his ACL. He missed the rest of the season. Then he went to the Rangers for that 1 year, and he was really good. And he went to dinner with Jim Hendry, and he convinced Jim that he was a changed man, that he was going to be a great teammate, and everything was going to be fine. And he got thrown out of his first game as a Cub for arguing balls and strikes at home plate. You remember that?
I don't. I remember he got hurt in the second game, stepping on through the base.
I think he was pinch hitting, I think, and he got tossed.
You're
and then
right.
He threw a ball into the stands with 2 outs.
I remember that one. I remember I was at the In Between Tavern in Delavan, Wisconsin, on a Friday afternoon. My whole family was up there watching that one. Good times. Yeah, and he caught the second out and then started fronting and then flipped it in the stands. Yeah. Got scored from second base.
He got hurt. And he wasn't good, and he was a dick, and his teammates hated him. And
remember that Comiskey Park? Lou kind of had to throw him out of the dugout at Sox Park that year.
They sent him home, and then they ended up trading him for Carlos Silva.
Who went 4-0, and then
he had an equally terrible contract with the Mariners, and then just traded bad contracts.
Right.
Yeah, and Silva got off to a good start, and then he was bad because he was bad, but everybody was happy because Milton was gone.
You know, in my head, I glanced over Milton because without thinking about it, I just somehow thought that it was a trade. Don't ask me why. Well, that is one of the worst ones in history, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think because Hendry was able to get rid of him in a trade. I think it just feels like the whole thing was they got him in a trade, they got rid of him, but they signed him. They didn't have to get him. They got him.
Got it. Yeah, that. I'm glad we're having this discussion because I somehow might have overlooked it. And that I'll tell you right now, that would, upon reflection, that is probably top 3.
Yeah. So. All right. So you want to give me another one of yours? I know who it's going to be.
Well, I'll do the other half of 91. I'm kind of chugging along here.
I actually thought this is who you were because I know this is your favorite, one of your favorite Cubs. I thought this was going to be the guy you started with.
Very similar story. Just for context, the third guy in this Jim Fry troika that ended up finally burning his ass and making Tribune gun shy until for 15 years was George Bell, who actually did have a good year. I think he was an all-star. That paid off, even though he needed a butterfly net to play the outfield at that point. But
it was an all-star.
He was. George Bell was good, so that was actually a free sign that was good. And then became Sammy. So, in some ways, that was one of the better ones. But in addition to
Ken Patterson,
let's not forget.
Don't forget Ken Patterson.
Not to be confused with Bob Patterson. They both pitched for the Cubs. You're right. Ken was the one we got along with Sammy for George Bell. But so besides George Bell and Dave Smith, the third free agent signing that Jim Fry made that year was former 20-game winner, World Series winner for 2 different franchises, left-hander Danny Jackson.
Danny Jackson.
And I'm sure, I'm not looking it up, I guarantee you his contract was much meatier than old-ass Dave Smith. Danny Jackson was still conceivably in his prime.
4 years, $10 million.
It's a lot. Yeah, so he was the number one signing for Jim Fry of that offseason.
Cubs had that money to spend, but then a couple years later, they couldn't scrape up any money to keep Greg Maddux.
Two.
1 year.
Right.
1 year later.
You're right. Yeah, no, you're right. 2 seasons. Because it was not the 91 season. Jackson, even though Greg Maddux had emerged and Rick Sutcliffe was still knocking off 15 wins a year, Danny Jackson got the honor of starting opening day, making his Cub debut as the, Maddux could have made a claim. Oddly enough, Maddux only made one opening day start. It was his last one. But Maddux had emerged. He was very reliably consistent, but Jackson had the big money. He's the ace, and he proceeded to go. Was it 1-6 or 2-6? I didn't think to pull it up, but
1-5.
1-5.
1-5.
Yeah.
He made 14 starts though to get that.
Wow.
1-5 with a 6.75 ERA, 89 hits in 70 innings. Struck out. Is this a red flag? Struck out 31 in 70 innings. Is that bad? That seems low. He had not been good in his last 2 years in Cincinnati before that. His first year in Cincinnati, he was great. He was 23-8 with a 2.73 ERA, finished second in the Cy Young. He led the league with 15 complete games. But then he was 6-11 in 89 with a 5.60 ERA. So it's not like, he's,
right. Bad luck.
Win losses doesn't really matter. And then 6-6 with the Reds, and he only made 20 starts in 89 and 22 in 90 and 22 in 91. So he had a lot of red flags, which Jim just ignored.
Yep.
And then he was bad.
He did win a game to help them clinch. Won a game in the LCS against Pittsburgh to help them win the pennant.
Yeah, because he was an 85 Royal and a 90 Red.
Correct.
So he won 2 World Series.
Yes. And then, of course, frustratingly, it was like Dave Smith, of course, was old. It was the end of the line. We did actually get something out of him. It was the 3-4 years of the blonde locks of Steve Buechele.
Yeah, which is worth it.
It was worth it. And Danny Jackson ended up turning it around. He pitched in the playoffs for Pittsburgh in 92. He pitched in the World Series again for the Phillies in 93. He actually had another second. It was frustrating, kind of like with Scott Sanderson. Like, guy couldn't stay healthy with the Cubs, and then he goes and pitches another 500 innings afterwards. But regardless, it doesn't change the fact that Jim Fry backed up the Brinks truck for old Danny Jackson, and it blew up his face.
Yeah, in the 85 postseason, he pitched in 2 games against the Blue Jays, 1 start, through a shutout. Pitched 10 scoreless innings in that round. He made 2 starts in the World Series against Cardinals. He was 1-1 with a 1.69 ERA. He only gave up 3 runs in 16 innings. And then in 90, he was really good in the LCS. He did get a start in the World Series, and he got lit up.
Got shellacked, yeah, when he came back.
Yeah.
He had a decent career, just not with the Cubs.
Not for the Cubs, no. He was no good at all. Yeah, he only made. When did they trade him at the deadline?
Of 92, the following year. Yeah,
July 11th. They'd seen enough. I wonder how much of his contract they ate.
No, Pittsburgh wasn't so small market either. I mean, they were, because they weren't going to be able to continue to afford paying Bonds and Bonilla. So I don't know. That's a good question. It's not something you'd probably be able to find in the transaction history, those details. How much salary the Cubs had to eat. Because he wasn't even halfway through that deal.
All right, so my next, so Milton was number 1 on my list. Number 2, I'm gonna go with this guy. It was a feel-good story when the Cubs signed him. He's a legacy.
No, he's on my list.
Everyone was very excited.
Yeah, it was not a feel-good story.
When
I know where this is.
when the Cubs signed Todd Hundley to come become their catcher and carry on the legacy of his dad, the Rebel. He
Um,
was available because the Cubs failed to trade for Mike Piazza, and then the Mets did because Hundley was hurt at the time. When Hundley got healthy, then the Mets decided, well, we'll just play them both. We'll just play Todd in left.
Yeah.
Which is one of the funniest things that's ever happened at a baseball field, is watching Todd Hundley try to catch fly balls in left field. It was just great.
Yeah.
So they traded him to the Dodgers for Roger Cedeno and Charles Johnson. And the Dodgers said, all right, after 2 years of that, that's enough of that shit. And they let him go. And the Cubs signed him, and he was immediately awful.
So I can remember. I have to bring this up because I was working in an office. I was in Willowbrook, Illinois. Had a coworker a couple years ago, another diehard fan, and it's like Todd Hundley was not old. He was the first switch hitting catcher or whatever to hit 40 homers for the Mets. He was a local guy, so on some surface level, you might think, yeah, like a feel good story joke. But I remember, like, we both hit when it was rumored, because this was that brief period of time where Andy McPhail had to put his tail between his legs and actually run things because it had really gotten off to a disastrous start, frankly. And when they were rumored to go after Hundley, I remember, like, both of us instinctively were like, no. There was just something about him then. Like, even before, so it was not even second guessing. Nobody gave a shit about the fact that he was from Palatine, the fact that his dad was a very beloved player. And, like, at the time, it was like, he's kind of broken. I don't know if, like, we were concerned about. His health was bad. He was a hit or miss guy. It seemed like his best days were behind him. He seemed like a weird, like a cranky person. There's nothing. I don't know. I just remember it never liked the sound of it, even at the time. So
I'm looking at him now because he had 3 good years for the Mets. 95, 96, 97. 98, he caught Tommy John disease, which is why he missed almost the whole season. And then that's a red flag, right? Like the catcher the catcher throws the ball more than anybody else on the team. He returns every pitch, and sometimes he actually has to throw to the base. Pitchers, come and go, but the catcher's got to throw all the time. It seems like a very bad idea to take a catcher who just had Tommy John surgery and sign him. Plus, there was the whole idea that he just wasn't a very good player until 95. And I wonder what magically happened, where all of a sudden Todd went from hitting 1 homer, 7 homers, 11, 16, 15 to 41, and then 30. Actually, his first good year was 95. He didn't hit a lot of homers. He had 15 homers, 51 RBIs. Yeah. I wonder if he got magically bigger for 96 and 97.
That's the peak of the era, as we know. And I'm just wondering if that was actually one of our suspicions in 2001. And that's why he was breaking down.
Even if he didn't do performance-enhancing drugs, we know that he liked the ones that maybe don't enhance.
Well,
remember, he passed out during a game in Busch Stadium. He was sweating like he was detoxing behind home plate during a 100-degree July game or whatever it was, and he just face planted right on home plate, and they had to come out. He's dehydrated. Well, yeah, he was dehydrated. He'd been at Shannon's until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly. He was swimming in a Budweiser vat. Yeah. His exploits were well known. Some guys like, Mark Grace were well known rocking tours, but they could get their act together and play ball. And other guys are just maybe, not so much.
So he played 79 games for the Cubs in 01 on that, that team that was flirting with the playoffs most of the season.
And he, I swear it was like a phantom injury where he disappeared. And they also had Joe Girardi. It was a weird thing because they brought Joe Girardi. He was there the year before, I think. And Girardi was like the opening day starter. So Hundley was already butthurt because they signed him and he wasn't even the opening day. Like they changed their mind at the last minute because they wanted Girardi to catch Lieber, or I don't know what was going on. But Hundley was so bad. And when he went on the DL and Bobby Machado came up, and it was Machado and Girardi, and they were doing well. And I remember just stay away, Todd, stay away. I remember being in a game and August where, like, no, I insist on coming back and ruining your season. And he came up like in a game, a crucial game in August. I could find it if I really wanted to, harm myself. But he kept coming up in a situation where he just had to put the ball in play and he couldn't do it. And it was like, why did you come back? Like, it just, you selfish prick. You're already getting paid. Just stay away. There's nothing redeeming. Even the one time he had a multi-homer game at Wrigley, I think in 2002, he couldn't help but ruin the moment by flipping the bird at Cubs fans because he was just I can find very little redeeming about the Todd Hundley era in Chicago.
So in 2001, he hit 187 with a 268 on base, 374 slug, 12 homers, 31 RBIs. 12 of his 46 home runs, or if 12 of his 46 hits were homers. So that's something.
1 out of 4 almost.
Because if it hit the wall, they could still throw him out at first because he wasn't hustling.
Yeah.
2002. So in 2001, he was worth negative 1.1 wins above replacement. So he was 1.1 wins below replacement. So that honestly, what are Joe Girardi and Bob Machado? They are a replacement level catcher. And our eyes told us that the Cubs were better with them. And it turns out it was true. In 2002, he surged. He had a much better season. He had 211 with a 301 on base and a 421 slug, 16 homers, 35 RBIs in 92 games. And the Cubs were still going to be stuck with him. How long was his contract?
Yeah, I think you said it was a 4-year or 3-year? Okay. And like some of these, like
it was 4 years, $23.5 million.
But we did get a rose out of the whole thing.
Yeah, right? It ended up. So the Cubs had acquired former number 1 overall draft pick of the Pirates, Chad Hermanson, somewhere along the way. And they packaged. Jim Hendry. Yeah. He was doing some wheeling and dealing. Almost 22 years ago to the day, December 4th, 2022.
Happy Chad Hermanson, Todd Hundley day.
Chad Hermanson and Todd Hundley were sent back to the Dodgers. Were like, yeah, sure, we'll take Todd back. Why not? We love that. That was fun. For Mark Grudzielanek and Eric Karros, 2 key members of the 2003 Cubs.
And technically, that was still Andy McPhail, but everyone knew that Hendry was going to be moving into that role, and it was really Jim Hendry that made that deal.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Unfucking Andy McPhail's idiocy. They're going to spend money. Let's throw it at Todd Hundley.
So they somehow survived that.
Well, yeah, I guess just like with Danny Jackson, cutting their losses and yielding the blonde locks of Steve Buechele, and sometimes something good could come out of it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say they signed Todd Hundley. They replaced him effectively with Damian Miller and Paul Bacco, and were much better off for it. So,
yeah,
attaboy Todd. Well, it's fun to see him at the Cub convention every year because he's working in the bathroom at the Sheraton now.
It was a 4-year deal, by the way.
Yeah, 4 years, $23.5 million. That was real money back then.
Yeah, like McPhail had a whole burning in his pocket. That's what it was. He had to spend on something. That's mediocrity by design.
Do you remember what? Do you remember that Todd actually wore 2 numbers for the Cubs?
Wore 9 and 99, right?
Yeah. Yes. First, he wasn't going to wear his dad's number. He wore 99. Maybe David Buford still had it. I don't know.
What year did A-Rod sign that? Then, funny thinking about it now in light of
it was 03, right?
I thought it was 2000 because he was already at the Yankees in 03, I thought. He signed it with Texas. So he left Seattle. He did not play with Ichiro. So a year after A-Rod, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There's fucking Andy McPhail, taking half measures and wasting money on Todd Hundley in the same era that, he could have gotten fucking A-Rod.
Yeah, 2001.
Same free agent class, so that tracks.
Jesus. A-Rod's baseball reference page is amazing. It's
A lot
a
of
lot of
bold.
lot of very bold ink on it for a guy who
Yeah.
he can go to the Hall of Fame if he wants. He just has to pay the admission.
Yeah.
All right, so you did have, I stole one of yours with Todd, or was Todd not on your list?
No, we shared one. That's fine. He's one of my
right.
5. So I only have a couple left. And I'm going to move on to 1993. We've already referenced Greg Maddux. Well, we've talked about Maddux countless times through the years, which I think you could make an entire podcast about not just the worst free agent signing, just the worst free agent, the worst move when Greg Maddux, the Cubs let him walk. I used to always think of my dad who lived through this Brock Broglio thing, which the media just loved beating like a drum. It's like, it's not even close. That was a trade. They made an attempt. They didn't do their homework and Broglio was hurt, but there's not even comparable. They let Maddux go for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, here's Larry Himes to say, we didn't let him go for nothing. We actually took all of this money that we could have paid him, and of course, famously signed Randy Myers, who did work out.
Yep, right. One of them was good, but they only kept him for. How long did Randy pitch for? 2 years?
For three years. He had another good year, 95. Dan Plesac, who was meh, so they're not busts. Jose Guzman, probably a bust, yeah, sure. You get past that near no-hitter in his debut. But an absolute bust, and I might be Willie Wilson was also one of these ones. I don't know if he was on that level, but an absolute premier signing of that class, starting right fielder, Candy Maldonado. And Candy was so bad that he was didn't even see Labor Day. But this is one of those ones where, again, sometimes it yields a little bit of a blessing down the road because we got the first round of awesomeness that was Glenn Allen Hill when they decided to cut the losses. But nevertheless, actually, I apologize. He was a left fielder because in 93, by then, Sammy pretty much did. Sammy was vacillating between center and right, and Dwight Smith, and Dawson was still around for 92. So, but he's basically there to replace Dawson, I think, because Dawson was on the Cubs in 92. Not it's just the salary, but Sosa moves to right permanently. Maldonado's our left fielder, but he was a guy who played for the Giants in the 87 LCS. He'd been around 5 or 6 years, a little bit of pop. And but for a game-tying 3-run homer off of Mitch Williams on a Sunday earlier in the year, it's the only good thing I can remember. The guy absolutely busted out. And he makes my list. He
had just left the world champion Toronto Blue Jays.
Oh, he's on the Blue Jays. That's right.
Where he played very well the year before. He hit 272, 357, 462 for an 819 OPS 125 OPS plus 560 at bats, 20 great power, 20 homers, 66 RBIs, 25 doubles. He signed with the Cubs for just 1 year, which should have been a red flag that his market wasn't better than that. 1 year, $8 million. Is that what he got?
Let's see here.
He made quite an impression with the Cubs. He made it 70 games, and they said, "Okay, that's enough of that shit." 186, 260, 286, and then he went on to they traded him to the Indians, right?
Yeah, I believe, or
traded
back
him,
to the Blue Jays. Cut him?
Oh yeah, he got traded for the Cubs making, chicken salad out of chicken shit.
You didn't hear me say that.
Glenn Allen.
The first incarnation of Glenn. Remember, because he left and came back.
Yeah, I was busy looking up. I was staring at Andy's numbers. Yeah.
So I'll immediately remember they at least cut their loss, and now it makes sense that it was easier to trade. I didn't realize it was on a 1 year.
No, he made 1 year, $1.6 million. That's all he got.
I guess it's not, so maybe it wasn't like a huge free agent.
But it's
signing.
just, it
was
weird
part of that collective.
They made a big deal out of it when they did it. Of course, they're making a big deal out of everything.
Well, they had to because they just let the greatest pitcher of this generation walk away in his prime.
His number one most similar batter, Jim Hickman.
Ooh.
Then it gets kind of bad after that. Eric Hinsky, Josh Reddick, Michael Tucker, Scott Spezio. A lot of Cub adjacent names on this list.
Yeah. That's a buster.
Yeah, he was off. Candido Maldonado.
Who's your next one?
My next one is a free agent signing that is currently haunting the Cubs, and I fear will haunt them for our lifetimes. Number three on my list, Jason Hayward. The biggest contract the Cubs have ever given out, 8 years, $186 million. And they seem... It's amazing to me that within like 12 months, they gave out a huge deal to John Lester, which worked. And they gave up a big one to Jason Hayward, which didn't. And all they seem to dwell on is the one that didn't work, not the one that did and helped them win a World Series. He was supposedly, I mean, they were so proud of this signing, and we were all excited because he'd been a good player in Atlanta, and he had been a good player with the Cardinals in 1 year there, and had played well against the Cubs in the playoffs in 2015. He hit a home run, Jake Arrieta. And what we probably should have paid more attention to was, why did the Braves trade him when he was 24 years old?
Well,
now the Cardinals tried to keep him. I mean, it's not, the Cardinal fans can act like, well, we knew. You didn't know. The Cardinals offered him more money than the Cubs did, but he wanted to come play for the Cubs. And it really pissed the Cardinals off. It probably still does. And he was 26. He was 25 years old, going to be 26. You know, a free agent,
which is rare,
right? It's like
free agent,
that's Bryce Harper, Juan Soto. But the only problem is the only thing those three have in common. Well, the Jason had in common with him was his age. But he had broken in against the Cubs.
Very first
Chip Carey screaming, "Welcome to the show." Fuck
I mean, he did hit that ball like 900 feet off of BC.
Well, didn't Jeff Francoeur break in against the Cubs and do the same thing? I don't know. Something
maybe.
Cubs had to take. He had been a 5-WAR player with the Braves when they traded him. They traded him for Shebley, right?
Shelby Miller. And the Cardinals traded for him because Oscar Tavares had gone a little too glug vroom vroom.
Wrapped his Camaro around a palm tree.
Mm-hmm. It was that time of year,
yep.
Early. So the Cardinal had to be sacrificed.
So they went out and got him. He hit 293, 359, 439 for the Cardinals. The slugging was the thing that should have scared everybody, because there's this huge dude who is slugging 456, 389, 479, 427, 384. But he was a good all around player, Gold Glove. He'd already won the Gold Glove 3 times.
Yes,
4 times by the time he got to the Cubs. 3. And it just seemed like, and the Cubs were so confident that this was a great signing that they gave him that 8-year contract. But after 3 years, he had a player option that they were sure he was going to be so good that there was no way he was going to opt in. And so the Cubs, it was basically a 3-year deal. It was going to line right up with their, Theo's plan was pay for pitching while these young hitters become stars. Then you have to pay them. But by then you've been drafting all this pitching, and this was going to fit right in. Hayward was going to be off the books just in time to extend Bryant and Rizzo and Javi. It was going to be great. And then he gets to the Cubs and he's fucking awful from the very beginning. And John Greenberg talked about this on this podcast one time. Because he signed in 2016, I mean, we noticed, but we didn't really notice. Like, fans were like, "Oh, wait till Hayward finally starts." Look, they're 25-6, and Hayward hasn't even hit yet.
Right.
And it's like, oh, they're first place by 15 games of the All-Star break, and Hayward hasn't even hit yet. And hey, they won the World Series, and Hayward didn't even hit. This is going to be great. And then we realized, well, no, he's never, ever going to hit. And he really never did. His numbers look okay in like 2018, 270.
Well, interestingly, his OPS progressively improves.
Yeah, well, that was John Malley fixing him. I mean,
631 in 2016 is incredibly bad. 715, 731, 772, 848 in the COVID season.
But that COVID season, I went and did them. If you look it up, he was only good. He was like, it was 60-game season. He was really good for 20 games. Like, he was lights out. But he was shit for the first 20 games, and he was shit for the last 20 games. But his numbers never, like... I mean, look, he's still... all that 6 homers, 22 RBIs. 22 RBIs in 60 games. In the best season he had for the Cubs. Wow.
And if you just look at his career line, it's like, that's a decent... That's a solid career almost very mid, just over 1,500 hits, a 748 OPS with that kind of defense. Very good player.
Yeah.
But then we're talking about contracts. So
yeah, he was way overpaid for his production. But really, the only reason it bothers me is that the Cubs let it affect them.
I see what you're saying. So it's the specter of it.
He's the reason they didn't go after Bryce Harper. He's the reason that they had to they remember when they got Cole Hamels, and then he had a $20 million option, and Cole pitched so well for them. We need to pick that up. And Ricketts made them cut money before they could pick up the option on Hamels.
That's right.
And it was all this. Well, Theo can't. You can't be canning out huge contracts that you're not any good at. We'll pay no attention to John Lester over here. We're only going to obsess over Hayward. What a real big market team would have done is just paper over the Hayward thing.
Right off.
Like, well, that didn't work. Big deal. We got, we'll just find somebody else. And they just couldn't do it. They let both Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber leave because Theo couldn't find a taker for Hayward. So they just had to get rid of both guys. It affected them. It's a big reason. It's part of the reason why they fell off, gradually. They were still good in 17. They were still good in 18. Yep. They weren't good in 19. That was the end of it. It was 18.
Yeah.
But it was a big part of it because it was a very convenient excuse for the Ricketts to say, look, well, this is what happens when we pay a guy a lot of money. It just doesn't work. So we can't do that anymore. And so that's why it's not. Everybody thinks he's a great dude. They love him. And it's 189 million is a lot, or 186 million is a lot of money to pay for a locker room speech, or a weight room speech. But it worked. It won the World Series. It's all because of Jason.
Right.
Hayward. They wouldn't have won it without him. They needed that.
Anthony Robbins. Yeah.
So begrudgingly, that's why he. Yeah. I feel like he has to be on the list. That's why he's as high as he is.
Even though he's on a World Series team, which seems a little discordant on the surface, but you make a good case.
Because I feel like we're still feeling it. Like Juan Soto signed for $765 million, and the Cubs, the supposedly big market team, not only didn't bother to even check in with him. They haven't given out a $700 million contract. They haven't given out a $600 million contract. They haven't given out a $500 million contract. They haven't given out a $400 million contract. They haven't given out a $300 million contract. Right. They haven't given out a $200 million.
Oh, I thought they. Oh,
Hayward's the biggest one they've ever given.
His is 176 or something. Yeah,
186. Dansby's 177.
Okay,
and that'll be the next albatross.
Ooh, Dansby's. Yeah,
they'll be like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
That's all right. He got his hernia fixed. He's fine.
Well, if Dansby does make the list, then he might have competition with another shortstop. First of all, historically, shortstop's not exactly a position that we've been blessed with. Dunston got some good years out of Javi. Whatever. We'll do that. We kind of suspended that whole. We'll have to come back to that. I think we've only done we're
gonna do that. Yes, we've only done two, right?
Center fielders and right fielders, I believe. But
left and centers.
Left field, that's right, Billy Williams. Anyway, the shortstop position, not one that had been so gloriously celebrated like center field or third base. Still trying to be addressed after the 97 season, and that's when still GM Ed Lynch decides it'd be a great idea to take basically what would be a hood ornament on a juggernaut Braves offense and take the one guy that just managed the mediocre Cub pitching at Wrigley Field and give him a shitload of money. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Jeff Blauser, 1998. Again, probably if you look at the numbers, the contract might not look that ridiculous, but if you look at the context, why even go after that guy? He was if you ever do an episode of Cub Killers, he'd probably be on it. Yeah. I can't believe Jeff Blauser actually is a 20.9.
He's a Cub killer. He wasn't two ways. He killed the Cubs when he played against them, and he killed the Cubs when he played for them.
He once hit 3 homers in a game at Wrigley Field, like a 92, and like that, back in 92, fucking shortstop. Before, even steroids were on kind. He wasn't on steroids. He just hit 3 fucking homers against the Cubs.
Yeah, and I feel like he ruined his. I'm going to look up his Wrigley numbers. He ruined them in his 2 years with the Cubs. Because you have to take it all with a grain. Because
he ruined his
I would like to see what his numbers were at Wrigley before he played for the Cubs. But even at that, 263, 356, 444, the 800 OPS is, well,
800 OPS
at Wrigley. This is for his career.
Got it. Sorry.
18 homers, 56 RBIs. But most of that happened most of the production happened with the Braves. Most of the outs happened with the Cubs. So he ruined it. Oh, I know what you look at. But if you look at his numbers against the Cubs, that'll tell you the right thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to get it. Oh, I have to flip back. But yeah, he was 2 years, $8.2 million. Which
wow. And
he was 34. How old was he when they signed? He was too old. That
32.
was the problem. 32. Yeah.
And what I find interesting is that he never played another game after the 99 season. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know they only gave him a 2-year contract, but they weren't thinking like, oh, these would be the last 2 years of your career.
So here it is. Here his career numbers against the Cubs. He batted .351, 413 on base, 611 slugging. That's a 1.024 OPS. 15 homers, 48 RBIs in 78 games. So he really was torching them. Let's see. That OPS, I believe, is the only teams he had a higher OPS against were the Indians, who he only played in 2 games against, and the Twins, who he only played in 4. So it was the Cubs and the Rockies. He had an identical 1.024. So Coors Field and Wrigley Field. Why didn't the Cubs trade him to the Rockies?
In Coors Field, also home of the Rockies, who were a expansion team, in the middle of during Jeff Blauser's prime, basically. Got the feast on them.
And in the West, so he played him a bunch.
Right, they were in the same division. So, back then, too, they would play about 15 times. So, you got to really beef up there. It was, hold on, it was 92. I know I can find it. Yep, here it is. July 12th, 1992. In a game that the Braves only won 7-4. Blauser went 3 for 4 with 3 home runs and 5 RBIs and a walk. Of course, they had to start pitching around at some point. And actually, it was a game that they lost in extra innings, so that's awfully frustrating. 3 home runs, a little shit.
Yeah, his 2 seasons with the Cubs, 219, 340, 299 slugging. This guy who slugged well over 600 against them until he got there.
Yeah,
slugging 299. In 99, he became a utility player. He played second, short, third, and left. And he got in 104 games. He hit 240, 347, 420. So not terrible. He was a little under league average, but given the promise and the paycheck, it was a complete disaster. Nice job, Cubs. Yeah, I had him on my list. My list goes to 10, and I had him 6th.
Well, you go ahead and empty out the barrels because those are my 5. I had Hundley, I had Blauser, Maldonado, Danny Jackson.
Number 5 is one of my all-time favorites. If you had me list the Cubs I enjoyed watching play the most, this guy would be right up there. Gary, Indiana's own LaTroy Hawkins.
Ooh, good call. Yeah, that's the bad signing.
Good old LaTroy. The ironic thing about it was LaTroy was signed to be, because the middle relief was so bad, it cost them the pennant in 2003.
Averas, Farnsworth was hit or miss.
Mark Guthrie.
Ossenmacher was fine, but yeah, they're thin.
Well, Ossenmacher wasn't there. That was Remlinger, who Dusty didn't know how to use.
I'm sorry, I confused Ossenmacher and Remlinger.
So he was really there to just be, he was going to be the setup man for Sweaty Joe. And it was going to be the difference.
I think there was some concern that Joe might not be built to last. And sure enough, Joe would get hurt, and LaTroy was thrust into the closer's role in 2004.
So, and that was the irony of it. When he was the setup man in 2004, he was very good. When he was the closer, shit went sideways almost every time. But as we talked about in one of the many podcasts where we just went off on Ryan Dempster, LaTroy was also completely overworked at the end of the 2004 season, to the point where that was the reason Dempster was asked to hold a 3-run lead against the ass end of the Mets lineup and couldn't do it. And LaTroy had to come out for like the 5th time in 6 games and try to pitch, and he gave up the home run.
100%.
But yeah, it wasn't, so he was, there was just so much with LaTroy too. Like, he had the thing where he was yelling at the reporters, and he said, the difference between us is I can do your job, but you can't do mine. Which, yeah, I mean, George Hoffman, sure. I'm sure LaTroy would have been better at his job than George Hoffman. There was that. There was him and
Bruce Levine.
Him and Jock accusing everybody of being. Was that right? Does that get my timing right?
No, maybe like separate interviews. Jack came along in 07.
That's right. So it's not that. But who was? There were 2 Cubs that accused all Cub fans of being racist.
Was it Butch Husky of the Mets?
I don't know. Dusty was happy to pile on too.
Well, Dusty checked out after all 3 of those.
And it was bad. Like, it was his overall numbers don't look too bad, especially in 04, 2.63 ERA, pitched in 77 games. But there was some really bad blown saves in there. At 05, the ERA went up to the point where they finally he got traded for Pukashel, Jerome Williams, and David Aardsma.
That's right.
Just to get him out of town. It was the contract was such a complete failure. They just had to bail on it.
So that's another one that. Well, do you have his page up? Do you know how long was it? 2 years, 3 years? Because that's another one that they cut bait in less than 2 years. Like we did with David Jackson.
LaTroy, it was a 3-year, $11.2 million contract. It was real. It was real money, and real years for a middle reliever. And honestly, if they could have just kept him as the middle reliever, it probably would have worked. But they couldn't, and he couldn't. He's talented enough to be a closer. He just couldn't really ever do it.
Well, I mean, if not that we need any other reasons to just continue to seethe with hatred towards Ryan Dempster, but anyone out there, Dempster had signed one of those. I know we've talked about it before, but it was a very successful deal that Henry signed him to a contract coming off the surgery, knowing he would not be able to pitch for the first 6 months. But the idea was to insert him in once Borowski went sideways and Hawkins was trying to keep his finger in the dike. Hey, this is and Dempster proved, he could be successful as a closer. All he had to do is throw the fucking ball over the plate against a couple of banjo hitters that'd be out of the league in 2 years, and he couldn't do it. So, I mean, I know the guy gets a disproportionate amount of love among the dopey fan base, and it always mystifies me.
For his hilarious Harry Carey. That's why.
If all he could do is he could have seized that closer role in 04, and Hawkins could have settled in, and a whole alternate history takes place, but he couldn't. So. Fuck Ryan Dempster for the 1 millionth time. So.
All right. Do you have anybody left on your list?
No, that's my 5. I want to. Well, go ahead and shoot.
I've got more. So let's see. So I had Milton at 1, Todd Hundley at 2, Jason Hayward at 3, Danny Jackson 4, and LaTroy 5th. And I had Blauser at 6. Now 7 is a guy I just mentioned. I got all excited. Is Jock Jones?
He passed through my. I was keeping my list to 5, but Jacques passed through my head.
So he signed a 3-year, $16 million deal, and I remember it got off to a bad start for me personally when I'd gone out to see my parents in Florida during spring training. Not that the Cubs were in spring training, but I had bought the book. What's it called? Fantasyland. It was Sam Miller wrote it. It was a book about fantasy baseball, and in it he has an interview. He goes in the Twins clubhouse and he's interviewing Jock about things that are important in baseball, like drawing walks and things that Jock isn't buying any of it. Thinks it's all bullshit. And I'm thinking, this guy might not be a great fit. And that's how he played, right? Like, he didn't walk. He struck out a bunch. He was supposedly this good right fielder, but he literally couldn't throw. He would spike the ball every time there was like a contested play. He would hold on to the ball too long and literally throw it 20 feet and then straight into the ground. He did it over and over again. It was amazing.
We called them word burners, but they almost were almost so directly into the ground that they didn't even travel. Like,
yeah, you wondered why they didn't just stick. How they even rolled, because he threw him so straight into the
like
ground.
2 feet in front of and I pulled up I anticipated we were going to talk about him, and what bothers me is that in 2002, in his really for his fourth full season, he puts up a 5.5 WAR, 852 OPS. All right, good stuff. And then 03, he's a 1.4. 04, he's a minus 0.1.
Which is why the
05
Twins.
is a 0.7.
That's why the Twins let him go. Or didn't try to sign him.
Fuck Jim Hendry again comes back to the whole media. Like, they're just shooting for the middle here. I don't know what other free agents would have been available going into the 06 season, but there's Jim Hendry, like, dining off. Like, he's rewarding a guy for a really good season that he had 3 years ago. So it's not even like, I mean, we're not even pinning it in retrospect. At the time, that's very dubious.
Well, it's funny. In 06, his numbers looked pretty good with the Cubs. 285, 334, 499 slugging. That's pretty good. 27 homers, 81 RBIs. But I can tell you, as somebody who watched all those games, he made zero positive impact. I guess it's a bad sign when you put up those stats and you're only worth 1.2 WAR. So clearly there's a lot of other stuff. He struck out 160 times, only walked 35 times.
That's actually amazing. He had arguably his best all-around outside of that. So when he had the 5.5 WAR, he had 27 homers, which is what he had in 06. And like, those numbers look similar, 852 OPS versus 833, but yet the WAR is drastically different.
And I don't know how much of that is defense. He was playing left field then instead of right.
Okay, so
the Twins, he clearly was not. With the Cubs, he proved was not a right fielder. He just couldn't really handle it. He ended up having to play some center in 07 because everybody played center for the 07 Cup.
Yeah, starting with Soriano. Oh my God, what is it? What a mismatch! What a fantasy team Henry's. So that's still the effects of not being able to replace Sosa, right? Because originally it was Jeremy Burnett in 05, and then Shock here in 06, and then still around when it gets Fonzie, which of course is not on this list, but no matter what our friend Chuck might want to say.
Yes, I did not put Alfonso Soriano on.
No, God, no. They don't make the playoffs in 07 without it, so I'm not going to have that.
So number 8 on my list was Dave Smith. Number 9, I'm going a more recent vintage, and a lot of this is just he wasn't good, but he also was so frustrated. It was Tyler Chetwood.
Oh, good one. Yeah, I had high hopes for that motherfucker.
Yeah, everybody did. He had put together a nice season with the Rockies.
He's a ground ball pitcher. He had success in Coors.
And he was going to be one of those. He was going to be one of their first pitch lab successes. They were going to tweak him, and then because he was one of those guys. He was 8-15 with the Rockies in 2017. Got to be pretty good to lose 15 games. Because you get out there all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
The 4.69 ERA. He gave up fewer hits than innings pitched. And so it's like, but he always did that. His biggest problem was he couldn't throw a fucking strike.
Yeah. It's the blast syndrome.
One of the most amazing stats was for the 18 Cubs, he got taken out of the rotation. They just had to stop pitching him altogether. He only made 20 starts. He still led the National League in walks. They basically skipped his last 15 starts. And he still led the National League in walks. He walked 95 guys in 20 games. It's amazing. I think he had a game early on where I don't think he gave up. I should look it up. He had a game where he gave up one hit through 6 innings, but he walked 7. It was like, just what the fuck is going on? And it never got better.
There was a lot of that. With him. That you nailed it on the head. That's a good call. Absolutely. Because even in the context of them being a good team, if he was good, that could maybe in spite of the suddenly reticent the reticence that they were showing in spending money. A team coming off a World Series, if he performs as in the manner in which he was paid, that there's maybe things go a different direction. But he completely he was an absolute black hole.
So then
he was out of the league shortly after. Been out of the league since 21. Sorry.
So then my 10th guy, I had a really hard time because there is no obvious 10th, I didn't think. But there's
Okay.
a lot of guys that I would have liked to have put in there, like Daniel Descalso.
Yeah.
Remember, he was the
Too low
only, but he's more of a victim of circumstance. Like, he was the only free agent Theo was able to sign that year. And they went on about, he changed his launch angle and now he's going to be great. And he was just fucking terrible.
Okay, yeah, that's defensible. I mean, that immediately makes you think of like when they signed Aaron Miles. I mean,
yeah, Aaron Miles is on. I have Aaron Miles on my honorable mention because he was so completely useless from when they got.
He was.
So I think that the guy I would actually put 10th. It's as much he didn't pitch very well. Well, you pick. It's one of these two guys. They both have similar traits. It's either Scott Air or Kent Merker.
Oh, I hate them both so much.
That's right. That's
like,
why
I have an irrational for each of them because both of them were just like those annoying, just like doughy white guys that were always way too comfortable just talking to the media and never performing. I think, boy, that's a tough call. I'm going to say Merker because Scott Air wasn't on the 04 Cubs.
Yeah.
Scott Air helped pitch the 07 Cubs out of like some big games I remember. So he was a guy that was shit in the tub for a good team. But Kent Merker did it in a way on the field and off the field that just makes me feel bad. So I'm more than happy to put Kent Merker's cancer-ridden brain in the top 10. Is that what it was? No, he had an aneurysm. I forgot.
I don't know. I mean, they were both former Cardinals. So that already didn't like either one of them. Air had been there a long time. Merker was only there for like 1 year.
You addressed like the bullpen in 03. They get Hawkins. You know, like, hey, let's get rid of Dave Veers and Mark Guthrie. So really, Merker is supposed to be an upgrade, right? Like that. He wasn't just like some guy that was like standing at the corner of Clark and Addison and like, hey, come on. It's like, the guy, he came up with that Braves pedigree, threw a no-hitter. He had some success. Definitely an upgrade over Mark Guthrie.
Well, and he's another guy like LaTroy. His 04 numbers look good. 71 games, 53 innings, 2.55 ERA.
Yeah.
But he did not. I trust us. If he didn't see those Cubs, it didn't work.
Right. There is a game that he contributed to a very painful loss in St. Louis in July of that year. It was the day before Ray Ordonez made like 9 errors. It kept Merker and he got ejected because he lost his shit because that whole team would lose all of their cool at the drop of a hat.
That was Ray's last game, right?
I don't know. It may have been, should have been.
I think it was.
Merker,
Ray never. When Ray left the Cubs, he never played again, and I think that was his last game.
But if you go to like sometime in July, you go to the night game before Merker blew a game that they had, and it was at the beginning of the end. And then, of course, there was the famous scene at the end where he feels secure and comfortable enough. This speaks more to Dusty to actually have the nerve to try to interrupt the live broadcast with his grievances in the middle of the game.
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of like the current Bears. Like you got guys that are just way too comfortable speaking out. And for that, I would gladly assent to Kent Merker being on the top 10.
All right, so some of the other guys I have that I wrote down on my list. See if you can find out what is common amongst these guys. Why I wish the Cubs had never signed them. Ryan Sweeney, David DeJesus, Ryan Dempster.
Because they all came with personal services clauses that ensured they would stick around town for their milquetoast asses to just be plastered on television and almost asleep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Why not Miguel Montero?
I have
personalities in the shows.
I have Dave Veers on the list.
Okay, sure.
I have Trey Mancini. Trey Mancini and Tucker Barnhart make it because they got the second year. It's not their fault. Their agents did their job, but Jed gave both of them 2 years. That's all right. He's back to doing it. He's back to doing it again this year too.
Was Hosmer just 1 year? He's part of that bunch. I feel like.
Not only was Hosmer was league minimum because he was still being paid by the Padres.
Oh, he was one of the old
Red Sox
types. Yeah,
I think it was the Padres. I think the Padres had to eat his whole salary. Then he finished up the year before with the Red Sox. We paid him the minimum, and the Cubs only paid him the minimum. So he doesn't make the list.
He was more of a Mick Kelleher free agent.
Do you remember the great Brett Anderson?
That red ass.
Yeah.
Who Yeah, he was a red ass.
Yep.
He was with the Dodgers the year before.
He was,
and he was
the Cubs had all these reclamation projects that had worked out for them. Like,
Ryan Dempster, of course.
It started was Paul Mahalam the first one?
And
then Scott Feldman. Yeah.
But they didn't always work. Like Scott Baker didn't make it out of spring training, but yeah.
Feldman was one. And of course, if we do worst trades in Cub history, we have to. The Scott Feldman and Mike Clevenger for Jake Arrieta and Pedro Strop has to be on there because Jeff Samardzija told us no team gets better after trading Scott Feldman.
That's right.
So how could we argue with him? Yeah. So Brett Anderson had pitched. He'd been a good pitcher with the A's. Then I think he signed as a free agent, maybe with the Rockies, and it went okay. Then he ended up with the Dodgers, and he got hurt. And so the Cubs were going to take this doughy lefty, and they were going to fix him, and then either flip him or he would just be a low. He would be a cheap fifth starter on the 2017. And he was terrible. He made 6 starts, gave up 34 hits in 22 innings, walked 12 guys, only struck out 16, and he kept bitching about Chris Baggio trying to change what the Cubs thought. The Cubs wanted him to change the way he landed on his front foot because they said he landed too hard on it and would throw his head off, and then he couldn't locate his fastball. And he told them they were full of shit, and he knew what he was doing, and that the next team he went to, he would prove it. And he went to the Blue Jays, and he had a 5.13 ERA. So I guess he did. He really showed it to the Cubs. He trimmed 3 runs off his ERA.
He did get some redemption in 2019 with the A's, but yeah.
But I just remember we went to a game and there was a long rain delay before it, and then when we finally got there, he was pitching and he just gave up 1 million runs. And it was so he's on the list. Chris Coughlin is on the list just because I didn't like him.
Sure,
he was fine with the Cubs, but I didn't like him. I put him on the list.
I'm neutral on Coughlin.
Similar, well, in effectiveness and maybe in strategy. Remember former Brewer Doug Davis?
Oh God, one of those soft tossing lefties that would always stymie the Cubs, and then he shows up and
he'd been great against them, and I think he also was coming off of some kind of injury, and the Cubs scooped him up, and he made 9 starts for him with a 6.50 ERA in 2011, and then those were the Quaddy Cubs, right? If you can't win for Mike Quaddy, I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah. Who else?
Let's see. After Doug, Aaron Miles.
Okay, good. Glad to hear Aaron in the list.
Yeah, he was abysmal for those Cubs. Little did we know that he was dealing with the trauma of him and
Morgan Ensberg.
They got.
Who else was in that hotel room?
They got held hostage in a hotel room when they were in the minor league.
Who else was there? So what was the story there? Was it just a bunch of naive, like dopey rich, like guys, like suddenly rich white guys that were trying to buy weed, and like then some equally moronic third-rate burglars realized what they had and tried to rip them off or something? Or they were held hostage in their Red Roof Inn or whatever it was in spring training. I don't know where they were staying.
March 14th, 2000. Police shoot one intruder, players unhurt. Dateline, Kissimmee, Florida. 6 minor league players for the Houston Astros and a woman guest. Who do we think the woman guest was? Do we think they hired somebody and then maybe somebody affiliated with her showed up for a little shakedown? And a woman guest were tied up and robbed in their hotel rooms by 2 gunmen, police said. Police shot one gunman while the other escaped following the Sunday night robbery at a Holiday Inn. None of the players were hurt. I've seen the movie Holiday Inn. I don't remember what was that like.
I don't think Bing Crosby was. Oh. Was that?
I thought the blackface, the Lincoln's birthday one, was troublesome enough, but apparently they cut out something else too. The players were identified as Morgan Ensberg, Derek Nicholson, Keith Ginter, Mike Rose, Eric Cole, and Aaron Miles. The woman was identified as Alicia Serbia.
Oxy. Oh, okay.
They're shaken up right now, but overall they handled themselves well. Tim Purpura, the Astros assistant general manager, said 5 players and Serbia. I'm saying that wrong. It's very Polish. A friend, wink, wink, of one of the players were in a hotel room watching television when the gunman burst through the unlocked door about 11 p.m. Commander Fran Owaski, a spokesman for Kissimmee Police Department, said they tied up the players and the woman at gunpoint and took cash. The gunman then moved to an adjacent room while one player was staying by himself. Players in the first room, meanwhile, managed to untie themselves, call 911, and lock the door to their room. When a police officer arrived, one of the gunmen ran out of the second floor room and jumped over a railing to the ground. Police were still searching for him. The other gunman remained in the room, pointing his gun at the player while backup officers arrived. They tried to call him to give up and come out, Owansky said. When the gunman apparently let his guard down, the player tried to wrestle the weapon from him. I want to know which player this was. I guarantee it wasn't Aaron Miles, because Aaron Miles. Aaron Miles was Nick Madrigal before Nick Madrigal. He's about 4'8". This small child was trying to wrestle the gun away from me. No, that was Aaron Miles. Officers heard the struggle, broke the hotel room window, and ordered the gunman to surrender. They shot him when he refused. So there you go.
That's incredible.
That's what I mostly remember about Aaron Miles, even more than his great run of 157 at bats with.
What was it, 06 Cubs?
With 29 hits. So,
yeah.
09.
Oh, 09. Who am I thinking of? Chris Steins might make that list.
Oh, there's a whole raft of.
Well, some of this like lower level, like not the big splash free agents that were still bummed, does inspire me to harken back now because it crossed my mind. And maybe I can make the list, but I remember the '84 Cubs. You know, we had Sutcliffe, we had Trout. If Scott Sanderson could get out of the hot tub, we'd have him. We had Eckersley. We didn't really have a fifth, Dick Griffin. So they went out and signed Larry Sorensen in his missing second R.
Oh yeah.
He was like a guy. He had baseball cards. He actually was 18-12 for the Brewers in '78, 15-14 in '79. You know, he had some really good career. You know, some seasons bounced around in the American League. Cubs had won a division. Oh man, now we got Larry Sorensen. I was very excited about Larry Sorensen joining the '85 Cubs, and now that I look at his numbers, I can see that. Well, I don't know how much of the contract. I don't know how far back Baseball Reference goes with those details. It just says he was signed as a free agent in January. I'm sorry, of December. Signed in December of '84, but then he was released the following year. So I'm guessing it was just a 1-year deal. Early years of free agent. Look, we're just 2 years removed from the great big Bill Campbell signing, so I'll take it. It was a legit free agent signing, and it was a bit of a buster. So I'm just going to throw that one on the pile. The lower level free agents busts.
I didn't think this guy qualified, but I wanted to put it on the list just because he was so dumb. Michael Barrett. I felt like he was too productive to make the list.
He was very productive.
But he was also destructive because he was a third baseman who the Expos decided to make a catcher out of, and the Cubs were so convinced after 1 year of him being a catcher that he'll be perfect. Is that right, or did the Cubs do it? I don't remember. I feel like he caught for the Expos first, right?
Yeah, he did. He came up as a catcher, and then because they had Sean Barry at third, and then maybe he's not working out. Let's move Barrett to third. You know, it just occurred to me, Michael Barrett, in addition to being one of the more colossal dumbasses in Cub history, he is like this one link between the Dusty Baker near miss and then the Piniella. Like he showed up right after they acquired him to replace Damian Miller after the 03 season. So he doesn't get to play. He's on that team in 04 that busts out. He was kind of a factor there too because he lost his shit down the stretch. 05, 06. He's quality. 07, the Cubs are good again, and he gets punched in the face by Carlos and gets sent on the time before the playoffs. So he never played for the Cubs in the playoffs, and yet he was their everyday player in 04, 05, 06, and part of 07. He was there right after their success with Dusty and right before Blue.
He won the 2005 Silver Slugger for the Cubs.
Yeah.
His career numbers for the Cubs: 284, 343, 484.
Yeah.
And they gave him away for Rob Bowen.
Well, he was not a good catcher.
No, he was not.
So if you put those numbers in a corner,
pitchers hated him, especially Carlos.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he actually, I believe, didn't he also kind of goof up for the Padres And the game 162 where they got knocked out by the Rockies.
The game where Matt Holliday still hasn't touched home plate.
I think that's it. Wasn't Barrett involved in that? I'd have to go back.
He was the catcher.
Yeah, I thought that there was like something that he did that he could have done better. That whatever. Maybe I'm just piling on but yeah, you can't really put him on the list. He was too productive.
Yeah. How about this? I put this down as one guy because they all were on the Cubs for the same reason. Ramon Martinez, Tom Goodwin, Lenny Harris, Calvin Murray.
Dusty's guy. It's like a sitcom or a Saturday morning.
Think about it. You only have like your bench is like 5 guys.
They're all the same guys.
We had to have 4 of them just because Dusty needed his guys.
Can you name them? What did you say? Ramon Martinez, Tom Goodwin. Who else?
Lenny Harris and Calvin Murray.
Yeah.
So 3 of them had been giants. Perfect. And then Lenny, Dusty just loved from afar, and you had to get him.
Dusty's guys.
It cost him a playoff game because he was so afraid Lenny Harris was going to beat him.
A name popped in my head. I'm pretty sure it's a free agent signing. Troy O'Leary. That was a buster. He was supposed to be like the 4th outfielder in that 03 team.
He homered in game 7.
Homered, right. He had the meaningless home run when like 10,000 people had already left the stadium.
Or 6. He hit it in game 6?
No, it was game 7.
It was 7. Okay.
It was after all the
celebrating. Maybe it was 8. Yeah. It's all blurred together.
Meaningless home run.
I have Ray Ordonez on the list.
Okay.
What about Jason Marquis? I feel like he did what he was supposed to do. He was just supposed to be a bulk inning guy, and he was annoying.
He was like a quasi replacement for an old Greg Maddux around that time. Do I have that right? Yeah. No, I got to think again. He was fine because he was signed as a number 5, and then he hit a home run against the White Sox. So,
and what I liked about it was both Tony La Russa and Lou used to do the same thing with him, which was he would just have to eat it. Like, bullpen was tired, and Marquis would give up 4 or 5 runs early, and with both guys, they're like, you're just going to have to keep pitching. I think he had 2 games with the in a year when he had a really good year with the Cardinals, he had 2 games where he gave up like 11 earned runs in games because Tony would just tell him, the bullpen is not, I'm not going to the bullpen. This game's over, and you're just going to keep pitching. And then Lou did it to him, too.
Yep. Yeah. A 0.8 and a 2.4 WAR. I think almost kind of got what they paid for.
And he didn't make that much money. He did what he was supposed to. Yeah. Shane Andrews.
He did hit a home run in the snow on opening day off of Kerry Leitenberger in 2000 that pushed the game extra inning.
I feel like he wasn't good with the Cubs, but I feel like in my mind, I give him extra suck points because I get him confused with Ian Stewart.
Well, I just got him confused here because I made a Sean Barry reference. It was Sean Barry that was with Shane Andrews that were fighting for third base. The Barry came along after. So who was it that you confused Shane Andrews with?
Ian Stewart.
Oh, okay.
Remember the guy they traded DJ the Mayhew for because Theo needed an everyday third baseman, and DJ was too tall to play second. That should have been the clue right then, right? When they traded a future American League batting champion because he was too tall to play the middle infield, and then they wouldn't draft Corey Seager to play short because he was too tall.
He was one of the bad.
They can't bend over. Like, what? Jesus Christ, Theo!
Right?
How can you be that smart about everything and be so dumb about this?
That was one of the early Theo moves that actually was bad.
Yep. That's why I didn't bother to put. I have Edwin Jackson on the list, but I feel like
part of the
he wasn't supposed to be good. He was supposed to just. They needed somebody who was going to get innings because otherwise they were supposed to lose, and they did.
He was a Yule log. Yeah, they had to just burn through him to get to the next point.
They overpaid him on purpose. They basically convinced him, look, you're going to make a lot of money. We're going to be bad, and you're going to just get your shit fed to you. But we're going to pay you $13 million a year for 4 years. And he's like, okay.
It was a bad contract, but it didn't matter because they were not trying to win. No. And I actually have fond memories of Edwin Jackson because he was, in a weird way, kind of part of the ascension. So, yeah. That seems a little bit odd to not, with all that money, to not in that little production, not put him on, but that's fine.
Can I interest you in Scott Sanders?
Ooh, you knew that we were in trouble coming off a playoff appearance in '98, and in our 4th game of the season, Scott Sanders is taking the ball.
Yeah,
99.
He had been good in 1 year for the Padres, right? 96.
I think so. Yeah, and that was decent Padres.
Yeah. But by the time he got to the Cubs, he had pitched for 4 other teams. And he wasn't good. And there was the last 104 innings of his career were pitched for the 99 Cubs.
Yeah, maybe in the team photo, but yeah.
I have Jose Guzman on the list. At this, I cheated because this guy was a free agent, but he was an in-season free agent, but I just had to put him on because Terrence Gore, because I hate him.
Yes, because he swung at a pitch when he should never have taken the bat off his fucking shoulder.
Yep. And then this guy, I think this guy probably should have been 10. I know you brought him up really in passing, but it was a disastrous signing and one that they had to make a waiver trade to get rid of him. They bundled a lot of bad to get rid of him. Mel Rojas.
He was a free agent signing.
Yes.
Yeah.
A decidedly terrible
one. Yeah, another closer. You know, they went tits up. They didn't really have a closer after they never really had a closer since Lee Smith. We already went over. It was like they went from Gossage to Mitch Williams to Chuck McElroy, Bob Scanlon. They're trying all kinds of crazy stuff. Doug Jones, like you mentioned, Turk Wendell. They gave him a shot. Rod Beck was good for a year, but he just wasn't meant to last. But that was afterwards. So yeah, but 97. Yeah,
they went from Lee to Randy Myers without a closer.
I'm sorry, Randy Myers. Yeah, why did I gloss over Randy Myers? That was idiotic. So they did have some success there, but still, after Randy Myers, that was the sort of like Terry Adams, Turk Wendell. So let's get a real closer again. And Mel Rojas, he ended up not finishing his first season. Right, he was part of that trade that you adore so much that doesn't happen anymore.
Both teams trading awful players.
Right, you never see that.
He blew 6 of his 19 save attempts for the Cubs. And I remember one of them in Philly. Where is this?
Mike Lieberthal.
Find it. There it is.
Yeah,
the Cubs, who had started 0-14,
yep,
and the season was over by tax day, but they had started to climb back. So I figured they went 0-14. They went 24-10. To get to 24-34. They were actually playing well. But still, I mean, it was hopeless. But
the 0-14 start leaves you very little margin, obviously.
Yeah. And I think they were on a winning streak.
This is like the Kennedy assassination, because I know exactly where I was when I was like at my brand new Micron computer in my AOL, and I'm like at my computer watching the game.
But yeah, and
I believe it was not just a walk-off homer by Lieberthal. I want to say it was my dreaded lead-changing walk-off homer, which is a whole different kettle of fish, if you ask me. Because if you make it out, the game's over. Instead, you flip the game. Yeah, 9-8 was the final, June 5th, Thursday. Oh no, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, this is a different one. This is
How many punches to the gut did they have against Philly that year?
Oh, that was
okay. In Philly,
no, you were right. In the 9th, Mel came in with a 8-5 lead.
Not even a save situation.
No, it is 3-run lead. Walks Darren Dalton.
8-5. Sorry.
Walks Darren Dalton. Gets rolling on a ground out. So it's fine. Then he hits Rex Hudler. Then there's a ground out. So there's 2 outs. They let Kevin Jordan, steal second base. Don't worry about it. And he gives up the game-tying 2-out 3-run homer to Mike Lieberthal.
Not a walk-off, but yeah. So
to blow the
save.
save.
Mixed memory for me.
He walked Kevin Stocker. They had to take him out. And then, no, they didn't. He kept him in. And Riggleman is just sitting there, just bemused by the whole thing. He gets out of it, strikes out Rob Butler. They go to Terry Adams in the 10th. And that's when Scott Rowland won it with a single. But yeah,
I'm glad
it's funny. You wouldn't think in an 0-14 season
offense.
there'd be a game you would remember crushing your soul,
right.
but it really was one. It did feel like, hey, at least they're playing well right now, even though they're not good.
Yes,
and then it was
they got a chance. Well, I mean, they faced the two teams that would battle for the pennant that year to start the season. They had a round robin of 13 games against the Braves and the Marlins. Not to make excuses, they were bad, but that put them in a hole, and you just don't have any margin for me. You're right, like because they weren't a horrible team. They weren't 0-14 bad, but it's just being placed behind the 8 ball like that. And Mel was not helping.
All right, so
he had 2 games like that.
I told you before we went on that I had unearthed the guy. I thought there was a guy. I thought he was a free agent, but it turns out it was a trade. And then in doing so, I thought an interesting fact about that I did not remember. And then it led me to a guy that was a trade who is famously hurt the Cubs, but then it turns out he hurt them twice. So I'll start with the first one, which was I thought Ismael Valdez. It was a free agent signing. He was not. He was acquired with Eric Young for Chad Ricketts, Shemp Ricketts, the one they don't talk about.
Son.
Chad Ricketts, Terry Adams, and Brian Stevenson. This is a good trade because Eric Young was a good player for the Cubs, and Ismael was not.
He wasn't.
He was a very talented pitcher who you were right. He would get blisters, and then he just could never really get it together. I think he had one really good year for the Dodgers, and that was it.
I was at a game that he won 1-0 and had the game-winning RBI, but did not get credit for the win because he couldn't make it to 5 innings because of his blisters. Okay. And like I don't know if it was Elias Sports Bureau or Chuck Hardy had dug up that they couldn't even find the last time a pitcher had the game-winning RBI in a 1-0 game, and then couldn't even stick around for the victory.
His first 3 full seasons in the big leagues, he was 13-11 for the Dodgers, 15-7, and then 10-11 with a 2.65 ERA. He was worth, in those 3 years alone, what is this? 8.4, 13.7 WAR. He was very good. But then before the 2000 season, the Dodgers were like, well, this fucker he misses games all the time, so they traded him to the Cubs, and he was not good overall for the Cubs. 5.37 ERA. So that was bad. All right.
That's a good call. It wasn't a free sign. Sure.
I think you're. No one can see this but me. Mike has wandered away from the computer, and he's still talking to me, but he managed to disconnect himself because of that. So the last thing I want to talk about, I need him because it's going to blow his mind when we talk about this. So I'm going to kill some time because I don't want to edit. I'm too lazy to edit this. So I'm going to see if I can just do this. Then we'll get to this astounding fact, which isn't even free agent related. I don't want to blow it. So we'll talk about this other stuff. But yeah, so the Cubs being, I can't decide whether they're bad at signing free agents because they have no like overarching free agent strategy ever since the creation of it 50 some years ago, or if they're just terrible at it. All right, well, Mike's back. So now Mike, here you go. I'm going to give you this has nothing to do with free agents, but I found it while I was researching the free agents. So famously in 98, there were 2 terrible deadline trades. There was Matt Karchner for John Garland, but there was also Felix Heredia and Steve Hoff for Todd Noel, Kevin Ory, and Justin Spire. And it didn't hurt us because Todd Noel, Kevin Ory, and Justin Spire turned out. It just hurt us because Felix Heredia was shit, and they kept him forever. But here's where maybe you knew this, maybe this is more common than I know this, but do you know who they traded Felix Heredia away for?
I can't even. I know off the top of my head. No, I can't even imagine they would have gotten anything for him. Can you tell me the year?
2001.
How long did he end up last? Damn.
It's going to blow your mind.
Is it Miguel Cairo?
It is Alex Gonzalez.
Whoa!
So Felix
Texas.
fucked us when he showed
No.
up in 98 by being bad, and then he fucked us again by getting us the guy who couldn't turn a double play in the
True.
8th inning.
But Gonzalez,
Okay.
I'll stand by the fact that Gonzalez was otherwise a very good shortstop. And then even though he was
other
not
than
a
the one
consistently
ground
good
ball,
hitter,
he actually
Right,
needed
I
a
know.
field. He was
Right.
great.
Well, you know, and if he only had to get one out, maybe he just gets the one out. And he also had this uncanny ability to hit a bunch of walk-off homers.
Yes.
Like 4. But
I think
yeah,
my memories of Alex are always going to be 3 things. It's always going to be the walk-off homers. It's
Yep.
going to be the error.
the error.
And then it's going to be it was the next season, right? 04?
Yes. Yeah, because he was traded for Nomar. He wasn't there that long. Yeah.
When he
Good
got
for 3
hit,
years.
he got hit in the forearm with a pitch, and
Yep.
the ump thought it was a check swing, and he wouldn't let him go to first. So he had to finish the at-bat, and when they x-rayed it, he had broken his arm.
Correct.
He broke his
What kind
arm
of a
on a pitch that he didn't get to go to first base on.
What kind of a coward can't make that case? Okay, I guess he didn't get hit.
Show him. It's your arm is like not connected anymore.
That's a fun fact you unearthed about Felix Heredia.
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember that. I think I knew that at one point.
The Run Fairy, one of the great nicknames
That is a great nickname.
of all time. Felix Heredia. So there they have it.
I think we've unearthed them all, actually. So,
well, it's funny. It ended up being more comprehensive than I thought because of the fact that the Cubs just didn't bother. They waited for us to ever sign a free agent, so we know who they all are.
Right.
It's not like trades where you got to go through well, there's the great trade they made where they got Harry the Hat Walker and whatever the other one was. We don't really know that, but we absolutely know all the free agents
in history.
As we were,
the only thing I learned was
when they started.
I just didn't know that their first free agent history also coincided with the oldest memory that I had that I would not have guessed was their first. It was just my whole idea again was that they were not players until Dallas Green arrived, and it was a very exciting thing that all of a sudden we had guys whose statistics I had recognized from their Topps cards were all of a sudden going to be playing for us.
So I would think it's very possible. I probably should have looked at. I would have looked up. I looked this. No, that's not right. I always forget that. I always think that the Cubs they had to trade for Ronce. They didn't sign Ronce.
Correct. Yeah, Mike Garman, or I think the guy's name was. Yeah, Say was not a free agent. I thought about it before. The 84 team was all built on trades. Gary Matthews, Dernier were brought in by trades. Keith Moreland and right field was brought in by trades. Durham was for Suter, Sandberg, and Boa or for DeJesus. Say was traded. Jody Davis, there you go. A minor league free agent. Again, I'm not in the spirit of what we're covering here. Sutcliffe was traded for. Trout was traded for from the White Sox. Eckersley was traded for. Ruthven was traded for Willie Hernandez. Tom Verizon was on the 84 Cubs. Maybe they signed him. I don't know. They were not even the 84 Cubs had any free agents. They were all guys that Dallas Green just brought in by giving up the shit that he had.
I do wonder though. They traded for Say on January 19th, 1983. But then they signed him to a 4-year contract on Valentine's Day that year.
Wow. Okay.
It was a 4-year, $4.75 million deal that included a $500,000 signing bonus, and it had performance and attendance incentives. It's funny because I'm sure Ron cleaned up on the attendance stuff. Because what do you think that in 83, now he wouldn't have cleaned up in 83, but by June of 84, all of a sudden, Ron's looking around the park going, fuck, there's fans here. This is more money for me. Like he picked the perfect time.
I like that. Well, that's an interesting contract. He's coming from the Dodgers. They're winners. They sell out. Yep. All right. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, good for Ronnie. The 89 team, like Lloyd McClendon might have been, but that's more of like probably a scrap heap pickup. So, and that's a good free agent sign. But they just didn't make, when they signed Andre Dawson because of a depressed market, that was like the first huge. There was nothing between like Green's early, right? There was nothing really between Green's early years and Dawson. Like, I mentioned the Larry Sorensen one. There might have been some middling ones at that point. Then you're going to have like some modest ones, but you go from Green's early splash to Andre Dawson, but there really wasn't a whole lot of activity then until Jim Fry fucked himself. And that just made Tribune Company more scared.
The 89 Cubs had at least one superstar free agent signing on it.
Well, Andre was still on the team.
I mean, other than that, even bigger than Andre.
Oh, what am I missing?
A fellow 1988 All-Star with Andre.
Oh, Vance Law.
Vance Law had been a free agent signing before the 88 season.
See, again, not part of this conversation.
But honestly, I don't know who else would have been. Barry Hill, Grace, Sandberg, Dunston, Dwight Smith, Jerome, Dawson. Dawson was, so we know those two.
Yeah, yes. Dallas Green,
Mitch Webster.
All the other ones. Traded for Dave Martinez.
Yeah, I'm sure Lloyd McClendon. Lloyd, I'm sure, had gotten waived by somebody, so that doesn't really count.
He's not a real free agent.
In fact, they may even traded for Lloyd.
They may, but it's So
they did. They traded Rolando Rooms to get Lloyd.
Yeah, so not a whole lot of free agent history ever, frankly. But even until Jim Fry, 91, then they get cold feet. Larry Himes was forced to spend money in 93. But really, until between Jim Fry, 91, and them signing Soriano in 07, they were never serious players. And that's where a lot of these shitty signings come because they were taking half measures.
Yeah, I think of the 36 guys who played for the 89 Cubs, I think the only two free agent signings were Vance and Andre.
No, not even the pitchers, right?
No. Like they got Sanderson in that three-way trade with the Padres and the Expos.
Correct. Yep. You have Carmelo Martinez and Craig Lefferts.
Lester Lacknaster was one of their own.
Homegrown. Yeah, we've covered that. So many homegrown players.
Yeah, I don't see anybody that they could have traded, that they could have signed.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. Very few big ones. The big ones, Lester, Hayward. Hayward's a bad one.
Tom Ricketts must gaze at the 89 Cub roster and weep. Oh, the good old days. Can't we go back to this? We didn't pay any of these guys shit.
Good.
Maybe what if Scott Boras will give us a blank contract for somebody? We can just fill in the amount.
Free agency, you fickle beast.
It's funny though. It's instructive, I think, to see how even when they finally won the right to free agency, so few owners would actually use it. They just were content to fuck over the players. And
they're not the ones that won any rights per se, as much as the players.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, the players won it. They won the right to be free agents, and then the owners, a whole bunch of the owners, including the Cubs, were like, "Nope, not doing that."
Right. Going to hold their ground.
Congratulations, you're a free agent. Hope you like playing for the Yankees or the A's because they're the only ones that are going to pay you. And Charlie's going to pay you, and then he's going to trade you.
Yep. And I suppose the Dodgers, although I don't even know if the Dodgers were players.
They were too busy. Their head up their ass about their wonderful farm system.
True. Yeah, it's just the Yankees. I mentioned Winfield, and there's Reggie Jackson, Catfish Hunter. I mentioned the A's.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an interesting study. Yeah, the 50 years of free agent history as it is, and really when you look at it in that context, how embarrassingly infrequent the Chicago Cubs, third largest market, dipped their toe in that.
Think about, it's almost like if you look at this and how A, unwilling, and then B, bad they were when they actually would do it. Maybe that had a lot to do with the fact that they couldn't win a World Series forever. Do you think?
Oh, that didn't work. Let's not do that for 15 years. Yeah. I mean, don't take any chances. Yeah, you brought up, just to sum it up, you brought it up perfectly with the Lester Hayward contrast. It's just a perfect contrast because one illustrates you go for it and fortune favors the bold. You reap all the rewards. The other one is whatever. Like, you still won it in spite of him in that particular case, but it's no reason to get so gun shy. No. Lester's the reason to fucking do it, because when it pays off, it fucking pays off.
And it's funny, it actually worked out in reverse, right? Like the free agent pitcher is the far more like volatile
Correct.
signing than the 26-year-old position player.
Yeah.
But the Cubs. It's not a lesson they learned from it. It's a excuse that they wield, which is, oh no, look, that didn't. You can't just buy players. We tried it; it didn't work. Well, yeah, but he batted 50%. That's batted 500. That's higher than most people don't. You have to try this a bunch. No, we don't want to do that. That's fine, but it's cool. I mean, just it's not like Juan Soto now makes 90, or Ian Happ makes a little under 8% of what his total contract compared to Juan Soto's. It's not like he's only 8% of as good a player as Juan Soto. He's like 14% as good as Juan Soto. So the Cubs are completely outperforming that. That is money so much better spent than what the Mets are doing. Congratulations.
In the black, honestly. Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. Well, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
Many of us have herpes.
This is rough, but it's also finished.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.